up a little bit more. All right, this is violin number 133, Monica. And I would say she is completely finished. So what I like to do is usually just test each string, and I'll see what the lower register sounds like. Alright, well, let's see how she sounds. Brand new, just strung her up. It's nice to sit here at your bench and have your little world of wood, and you don't count the hours, and you don't think, oh, I can't wait till this is finished, and you don't want it to hurry up. It's like your little secret world that you're in control of. Really, in making a fiddle, it's pretty much, I mean, I know this is a simplification to say this, but pretty much just you kind of think that the fiddle's already in there in the wood, and you just cut away what doesn't belong. It's like unwrapping a present. The beauty of being an amateur maker, I just do it the way I feel like doing it. First question, the most common question I'm asked when I'm talking about violin making and someone's interested in asking about it is, how long does it take to make one? And the second I tell them, and then the second question invariably is, isn't it tedious? Being a fiddler, I didn't start playing the fiddle till I was in my 40s. And when I decided to start playing the fiddle, I just became obsessed with it. I just fell in love with fiddling. And then the next thing came was finding a fiddle that sounded good. When I started playing other people's fiddles that were handmade, I realized what I was missing. I heard the tone and the voice in them. And so I set out for this search for the holy grail of fiddles. And I spent several years buying fiddles that I thought were it, and then having them for a couple weeks or a few months, and realizing that it doesn't have the tone that I like. I met a man in Florida who was an expert in violins, and he taught me how to make them, and the way he did it was he started me out repairing fiddles, putting them back together again. He had work to do, and corrected my errors, and brought me along. And when I reached a point where he felt like I was ready to make them, he said, well, you're ready to make a violin. And I remember saying, I can't make a violin, you have to go to school for that. And he said, well, you've been there, you're ready to do it. And sure enough, I found it was easier to make one from scratch than to do a lot of the restoration that he had me doing. Finally, after over a year, he finally showed me what to do to get a certain tone. And sure enough, it worked. He said, okay, that's my fiddle. And I said, oh, you want to buy it from me? He said, no, you're going to give it to me, it's my fiddle. And so I said, well, why? Is that to repay you for all the time you spent with me? Because I was glad to do it. He said, no. He said, you don't owe me anything. But he said, if I let you keep this fiddle, you'll never make another one, because you're happy with it and you'll play it. He said, if I take it from you, you'll make another one. And he said, I want you to make fiddles. I thought, well, I better make another one for me. So to this day, this is going to be number 133, and I make each of them for me. And if I ever make a fiddle that has that golden tone, that holy grail of tone that I'm dreaming about, I think I'm just going to keep it and stop making them and just play it the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Really for selfish motives. I'm still searching for that fiddle for myself, and rather than going out and buying them and trading them and selling them, it's much easier to sit at home and just make them and see if I can find it. So that's kind of how I got started.
Do you remember the very first time you picked up a violin and
So that next week when I went to the music store and said, I want a fiddle. What kind you want? I don't know. You know, how much you want to pay? I don't know. I don't have much money for one. And I had no idea the difference between a student violin and a pro violin, but I bought one.
At that point, you could not play. I mean, you didn't know how to
No,
play one.
I didn't know how to hold the bow.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to play. I was holding it wrong. I was holding the bow like a hammer, and I didn't know where to place the bow on the strings or any of that stuff.
Do you think a lot of fiddle makers are more romantic types than say
Yes.
guitarists? Or?
I think the fiddle's different than other instruments, guitars, banjos, mandolins. Even though the other instruments have certain voices that players love, the fiddle is different because it's more intimate, in my opinion. And for one thing, you hold it up under your chin, and it's right here. And it's kind of a substitute for your vocal cords. When you play the fiddle, you're singing. You're not using your vocal cords, but the part of your brain that controls singing is the same part of the brain that is kicked in when you're fiddling. And the proof of that statement is that if someone's playing the fiddle, they can't. It's really hard to talk while you're playing. And so just like singers have their own individual voice characteristics, a fiddler has their own playing style, but the fiddle they're playing has its own voice too. And that voice is really important to match the person playing it. If it's not a good match, you don't feel inspired to play the fiddle as much. And that's what I strive for when I make fiddles. I enjoy the mechanical part of making them, the woodworking and the carving. And I probably wouldn't get any awards for workmanship. I mean, they're okay, but they're not like the master violin makers are that had years of training. But what I'm after when I make fiddles is tone, is playability and voice. And in the final 2 or 3 hours, that's where you get probably 95% of the tone and voicing of a fiddle. So that's where you have to slow down, put your power tools away, and start using hand tools, and start tapping, bending it, pressing it, looking at it in the light, to determine when to stop carving. And so I have this little stone someone gave me. I like to keep on my bench, it's full of dust, but it says listen. And I use that, it kind of reminds me at the end, again, to slow way down and to start listening to the wood and seeing what it wants to be. And it's not going to be the same as what the books call for with the technical measurements that it says it should be. So now, here it is. You can see a little bit of flame there. It's really going to stand out when I dye it and put the coloring on it and the varnish. So now I have the violin assembly. This is going to be the fingerboard that's eventually going to go on here like that. And it's actually starting to look like a violin. And just get a kind of a loose line there until they're all ready. It started off as a block of wood, different pieces and parts, and she just, like I was telling you the other night, Ted, this fiddle, as I was building it, it just practically put itself together. It was one of those violins that wanted to become a violin.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to fight with it at all. I didn't have any issues. Nothing went wrong. Every step of the way. There's over 80 joints in a violin. It's finished.
Yeah.
This is a finished violin ready to be played by somebody, ready to go. This violin, Merlefest is coming up at the end of April. And, you know, as you know, I'm a sponsor of Merlefest, and I have a booth every year in the expo tent where I show my fiddles. And this violin will be the fiddle that's going to be in the silent auction at Merlefest. And
that one will be?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to make this one. And that's why I wanted to finish it at this point in time before Merlefest and give it a month to settle down before I take it over there. This is going to be the silent auction fiddle, and they use it to generate revenue for the community college and for the festival. So, I'm going to draw the bow for the first time to see what she sounds like. And first I'll rosin the bow a little bit.
Sounds like a song, Rosin the Bow.
Brand new, just strung her up. Yeah, it's a fiddle.
Sounds great to me.
She's a fiddle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fiddle.
Sounds great to me.
She's a fiddle.
Yeah.